All right, friends, today for our lesson for water, we have a math extension. Our problem of the week for investigation 2, hot water, cold water. If you could turn in your water booklets to page 14, you're going to see this problem that we're going to solve. I'm going to read it out loud and I'm going to take you through it step by step to help you better understand what's being asked here. All right. When Madeline's family goes camping, they freeze water in plastic jars with lids to put in their coolers to keep the food cool. Madeline's mother asked her to fill and freeze 3 jars of water. Madeline filled the jars all the way to the top and screwed on the lids. She put the jars in the freezer. 2 days later, she went to the freezer to get the jars and found that all 3 jars had burst open. She wasn't going to be able to use them. Her mom asked her to try again. She gave her 3 new jars and suggested that Madeline put in just enough water so that when it froze, ice would fill the jar just to the brim. 1 jar held 500 milliliters, 1 held 1,000 milliliters, and the third was a 2-liter bottle. Madeline remembered from science class that when they froze 45 milliliters of water, the ice expanded to fill 50 milliliters of space. How can you use this information right here? Use this information right here, okay, to figure out how much water Madeline should add to each jar so that when it freezes, ice fills the jar just to the brim. Show your math in the space below. So we know that to make 50 milliliters of ice, okay, 45 milliliters of water because it expands when it's in the freezer to 50 milliliters. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to take away 5 milliliters from every 50 milliliters to account for expansion. And remember, when it expands, it gets larger because that's what happens to the water in the freezer. So that being said, okay, what we're going to do to figure out jar number 1 is we are going to add, so let's add 50 milliliters over and over until we get to 500 to figure out jar 1. Okay, so here's jar number 1. And for the sake of this, I'm going to need to figure out all 3 jars. So I've divided it into 3 parts. All right, so jar number 1 is 500 milliliters. So if we simply take the number 50 and we add the number 50 so many times until we get up to 500 and take away 5 each time, that will give us a good way to determine it. Okay, so let's see here. We're going to add 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400, 450, 500. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 times 50 is 500. Now, if you simply subtract 5 from each of those, okay, that gives us 500, take away 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, which equals 450 milliliters. So how much water should Madeline put in each jar? For 500 milliliter jar, she should only put 450 milliliters of water in, because what's going to happen is when it goes in the freezer, the water is going to expand, and we want it to be just to the brim. When I say just to the brim, I'm talking about this is the very, very top. We want it to be just to the brim, okay? We don't want it to overflow. So now we need to take a look at what were the other jars that her mom wanted her to fill. So one jar held 500, one held 1,000. So jar number 2 held 1,000 milliliters. 1,000 milliliters. So we can kind of use a strategy from what we figured out here to help us apply to this one. So if it's 450 milliliters for 500 milliliters container, then how much is it going to be for 1,000? Well, couldn't we just take this number right here and double it? I mean, if you want, you can add 50, 20 times and figure it out that way. Or you can just take that 450 milliliters and you can double it. So if you double 450 milliliters, what do you get? You get, well, let's see here, 450 and 450, 900 milliliters. And that is how much you would need, okay, for 1,000 milliliter jar, because that extra 100 milliliters is going to be the frozen water. Okay, that when it expands in the freezer. So now for jar number 3. Well, jar number 3 is a little tricky simply because it's telling us a 2-liter bottle. However, a 2-liter bottle just means it's 2,000 milliliters. Okay, so a 2-liter bottle is equal to 2,000 milliliters. Okay, well, we can do the same thing again. If you want to add 50 that many times until you get up to 2,000, you can. But if we know that jar 2 is 1,000 milliliters and that took 900 milliliters, well, couldn't we then just double the 900 milliliters? And that will tell us how much we need for 2,000. So double 900, okay, and you get 1,800 milliliters. So for a 2-liter jar, she needs to fill it up to 1,800 milliliters because it's going to expand an additional 200 or a total of 200 milliliters. Obviously, the larger the jar, the more space it's in there, right? So it's going to expand a little bit more. So that, my friends, is our answer to the math extension. Okay, if you need more help with this, feel free to ask, and your teacher will most definitely be able to help you or assist you with that. All right, see you in the next lesson.